Consents delegation. Item 11. Who's doing this? You, James?
Chair, look,
Welcome.
so I think this is relatively self-explanatory, and as advised via correspondence from the Acting Chief Executive and to me, the councillors this morning, this is effectively a temporary set of arrangements until more permanent decisions are made in relation to roles and responsibilities, and it's simply about managing workloads in the present point in time. There is intended a more fundamental review of the delegations manual that will be brought back to the council shortly for your consideration, and that will pick up a whole range of more substantive matters about how our regulatory functions are undertaken.
Happy to move.
Thank you. The second, do you wish to speak?
Oh, only to say it's, you know, when you go back over the term of this council so far, we've sort of had an extraordinary set of circumstances that have created a lot of pressures on a limited team, and we're all hankering to see some change, and we've done 80% of that with appointing a new chief executive. So I think that person needs to get on and look at some stuff holistically. And I will be making the same commentary in the next item, which I have some views on, which probably better if I don't express them. But anyway, we'll get there when we get there. But I think this is just normal chores for the council as it sits at the moment. But this will not be normal going forward.
Okay. Did you move? Did you?
I moved.
You moved. And you second. Did you wish to speak?
I wish, please. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment. One of the platforms that I campaigned on was to assess the staff delegations for appropriateness, and I think that the process that you outlined, James, is going to complete that, so I'm really pleased to see this has been kicked off. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Otherwise, I'll put the motion to accept this paper. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. We'll move to item 12, Operation Efficiency Review. You're on. Are you? We'll start with you. Greg.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say a few words and then take some questions. But as I want to say this report was written 2 to 3 months ago, and I've worn many hats over its life. I'm now wearing the hat of the soon-to-be ex-interim CEO. One of the benefits of wearing these many hats was the opportunity to ask the executive team to review my report. It was hardly appropriate for me as the acting interim CEO to review my own report. The benefit of this was that it showed me that many of the strategy-related issues that I had raised were already being covered or about to be covered. And this fact can be evidenced in the draft strategic plan, which was made available to the councillors last week. Other recommendations, such as travel, fleet, training, are being acted on already by Paul and his team. The rates recommendation has been agreed to in principle by Paul and the team, but it is too late to effect any change in the current rating round, and so therefore, will be looked at again with regards to the 2018-2019 rating period. The consents compliance public-private benefit recommendation is work in progress, and Jane and I have agreed that over the remainder of my stay here, I spend some time looking at that area and working with those people on the staff who know more about it than I do. The observation and comments that I put on at the end of the report were left in there for a number of reasons. Firstly, so that the councillors may get a better understanding of how some of the things worked around here. They were also left in there for the same benefit for the new CEO, but probably not required considering the choice that you made, and to identify possible areas for future work. The CFO-related recommendation, the time to act on that is probably, is probably passed. But in as much as the recruitment has already begun, however, it does not mean that the new CFO needs to be a direct clone of the departing one. But I think what could be done is that all of the attributes of the departing one be brought on board, plus look for someone with experience in working in the shared services environment, which might be, this person might be able to drive such an agenda here in the organisation and across the region. So that's really all I wanted to say, and quite happy to take questions.
I'd like to make two comments, and the first, taking directly off your last set of remarks. It seemed to me in this that a lot of the comments and observations had to do with the broad area of IT, data management, collection of what kinds of information we collect, how we manage it, et cetera. And that's been a neglected, my observation, and reinforced by your commentary, is that that's been a neglected area. And I guess there are a number of ways that could be addressed in future staffing, but in many cases it would be the CFO who would also embrace that set of responsibilities, particularly since a lot of what you're talking, about half of what you're talking about in that arena has to do with financial accounting and reporting. The other half of that data relates more to collection of data in the field and systems for that sort of thing and what have you. So so the first part of my comment, I guess, would be that I would hope in this search process that we've defined it in a way that it might help find a person who has that broader capacity than strictly dealing with keeping financial accounts straight. The whole IT area, I think, is a big and increasingly demanding one as we go forward here. The second comment I would make is that a lot of these comments wind up having to do with execution and how execution has happened. And I think we deserve a discussion in workshop or something as to our views of that, our perspective on some of these issues that have been raised here. Some of what you're commenting on is very narrow. Some of it gets into more strategic issues, actually, like communication strategy, and there are a number of others, economic development you make comments on. And so I don't think this is the forum to have those conversations, but I'm hoping we have agreement amongst the group here that the chief executive gets his chance to go off and sort through all this and identify some priorities as he sees fit, but that we also have a chance as counselors to comment on some of our own experiences and observations about the issues that you're raising here.
I've no real response to that. I expect that is exactly what's going to happen in conversations that I've had with James. We've already talked about some of the actions that he proposes to take, or what may be the recruitment process for the replacement of Paul, or alterations that might be able to be made to the specific requirements that he's looking for.
Possibly, I'll just follow up on that. So the IT function was very much part of the scope of the job description that has been advertised, currently recruited for. Applications closed Friday, had a really, really good response so far, and part of the evaluation process I'll be going through will be considering relative strengths in different areas, including financial and IT. But look, it's pretty clear that over time, this organisation is fundamentally a knowledge-based organisation, is growing in its dependence on IT, and there are more and more technologies that will enable our business going forward. And one of our challenges going into the long-term plan is the level of ongoing investment that's going to require. And it will bring efficiencies and it will improve our effectiveness and our impact, but it will take investment.
We have a huge amount of information gathering that's being mandated to us And it sounds on its face that we don't have very effective ways of managing it all at the moment. So,
Well, look, just to be fair to the we've got a very innovative IT team here that's been leading some of these areas nationally. But look, the ground in this space shifts faster than people can run, if you like. And so it is something I want to have a really good look at and see whether our level of capability, capacity and overall investment it is sufficient.
Fenton.
I'll get to the recommendations at the end here. I just think recommendation 2's a little bit early, actually. And I go back to a couple of papers ago, we're talking about looking at our capital structure or etc. And to me, as a governor, nose in, fingers out, a better recommendation from us to the Chief Executive is find me $500,000 savings, or whatever the figure might be, and then they go away and work this thing up. I've read this report. I struggle with it on the basis that you get to the executive summary. There's a recent sea change. Well, there's a recent sea change in this organisation that flows back for years. Used to be flood protection, used to be sawfly issues, now it's water. This is the world we live in. It moves on and on and on. And the executive summary does not do the paper justice at all. I find it quite frustrating, but I will not go into that. As I said in the last, I could tear this thing to bits, but I won't, because that's not appropriate. I will if we get into recommendation 3, look out, because I'm quite animated about this. But I think if we agree to note the operational efficiency report and let our Chief Executive get on with it, I'm quite happy. But the fact that we've got to delve down into all these issues, frankly, not a good use of our time.
Are you suggesting a change to this?
Change the recommendations.
He just wants to say, receives and notes the operational efficient report and let the, yeah.
Chair, look, a possibility is that 3's recasted as noting the recommendations and invite the incoming Chief Executive to report back on the report in due course, so to finish effectively the rec as the rest of it stands.
I would be happy with that. What about you, Neil?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate Councillor Wilson's coming from. However, we do involve ourselves, particularly in the Finance and Audit Subcommittee, in significant, if you like, details of council operations and business. I see it as a part of its actual function to do that, to establish a work program, and already that subcommittee has this item on its work program inherent. And what I'm suggesting is a better process is to actually ask the Chief Executive to come back with, if you like, a work program in relation to the efficiency measures arising from it. There may be some that he doesn't wish to proceed with, but many that will. So what I'm suggesting is a framework to tell councillors, this is what I plan on progressing. These are not what I'll be progressing, and those areas of work will be monitored, if you like, nose in from council at either the corporate strategic level or at the subcommittee level.
Can I just make a comment before you guys, you want to make a comment too? Oh, I'm very sorry. I normally pick them up. You're looking very cross. The way I see this is we've brought somebody in with special expertise to have a look at our business from an operational point of view. They then, we were very fortunate to have that particular person on board, and they stood in as our CEO, interim CEO, while we picked a CEO. And now we've got their thoughts on paper. I would have thought that Fenton was right, that those thoughts should go to the CEO and his executive team and be absorbed by them, and they come back to us, because we're going to have a new team on board. We've certainly got a new man at the top, and they're going to have their own view on the way things are done, and it's going to be a new brush, so to speak, and they have the advantage of having this report. So I would have thought that we should hand it to him and his executive team. They can mill around it, and they come back to us what they want to do with this organisation. So I would have thought that's the way it would be done. You certainly can say so. Oh no, I'm getting.
Sorry to bump in before you, Debbie, but it's just to set the scene here. I mean, I think that's when this journey started. Whenever it was 4 or 5 months ago, that was the intention, that this paper would be, prepared by, some fly-by-night consultant, presented to the CEO, and the CEO do with it what he or she wanted to do. It got complicated by the fact, as I've outlined in the paper and in conversations here, that, I morphed into the person that was reviewing it, and therefore put it back to the council. If it had gone to the new CEO, the CEO, whether it was James or whether it was Andrew Newman, would have said, yep, fine, agree with all of this or don't agree with it, and we're going to do 1, 3 and 7 and report back to the council. But that's not the way that it happened.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you. I agree. This belongs with the new chief executive, and I'm happy to note that, we've received it, but there's content in here that I think shouldn't actually be forwarded further. And for instance, we've got legal expenses where May Chen's been highlighted. Well, actually, we engaged Chen Palmer, so it's inappropriate to single out an individual as opposed to a law firm. And why you've singled out one law firm, I'm unclear about. You've also signalled out one salesperson who received a performance bonus, but I question whether that was actually HBRC or council. So how correct is that? I think that when you suggest with iwi Laz and that the two regional planning committee and Maori committee are morphed into one, well, one's in statute and one's not, so that's a can of worms that should be very carefully considered. And I think the works group, I strongly disagree with your recommendation there. That's all as well, and I think that's a discussion that I'd like to see we have further in terms of governance oversight, whether it's HBRC or whatever. There's just facts through here that I question, so I think that this is half-baked and it is a work in progress, but the most appropriate place is back on James's table.
Thank you, Chair. I do not find this report half-baked. I do not find this report missing or unsatisfactory. I found this an excellent report. I even have had feedback from members of the public who have expressed their praise of the report and the way that it's been written, and the fact that it's picked up a number of issues which they had attempted to bring to council over the years and had been totally ignored by either staff or by elected councillors. And that Greg has had enough insight to be able to pick those issues up and put them into a report. I was thanked for that. And I'd just like to pass on those thanks to Greg himself. Thank you very much. I totally agree that this is something that now should lie in the hands of the CEO to deal with as he sees fit, and obviously bring back recommendations to us as to what he's wants to do or not do from that report. Also, totally agree with what Councillor Belford was saying about the emphasis on IT and how that particular issue can be, it can get away quite easily on an organisation, but it's something that we need to be on top of. Thank you.
So, again, to be clear, I think this is an excellent report. It's identified, what it has done is identify a smorgasbord of potential issues, some of which are really in the weeds here, and some of which, graduate up several levels to being reasonably strategic in their implications. And so I have no problem with this being handed to the chief executive to digest and sort through and whatever, but I would sure like to have an opportunity to understand what is the plan of action out of this, what things are going to be given priority or not, and how we might expect that to proceed. I think that's a reasonable expectation that we should have, other than just saying, good luck, James. There are some big issues embedded in here that I think are worthy of governor's attention at some point after he has had a chance to digest it and frame it up for us.
Mr. Chair, just to see if we could advance this along a little, I'm suggesting we modify recommendation 3 by deleting accepts and simply says that council refers the recommendations by the Operation Efficiency Review for consideration by the Chief Executive, where appropriate, initiate the work programs necessary to implement the efficiencies or benefits to be achieved, and reports back to council.
Sounds like a good compromise. Well done, Councillor Curtin. Or yeah, maybe I think, yeah. Councillor Wilson, are you happy with that? You're not doing your emails, are you? Got to get these things right, Mr. Mohi. Got to get them right. Get it up, Neil, you have a look at it and just make sure it reads the way you want it to read. Change? Just this, and then we'll take the... I will pass the whole lot. Moving along. We're going to pass the whole lot with this new addition into it. We've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Recommendations. Right. We are moving to report from the Regional Planning Committee. And James, I'm going to ask you to how we got on with 2.2.
Chair, so look, these were all just noting reports, so
Yeah.
none of them were decision items. The clean water reform proposal is a separate item on the agenda, and we have Marianne to talk to that, so there's nothing else required here, unless there are any questions for council. So it's on the separate agenda. It was 20.
Oh, 22.
22.
Okay, we have a mover. Seconder. All those in favour of accepting the Regional Planning recommendation? Aye, moved. Right. Fixing the common seal. Second. Any comments? The mover and seconder. All those in favour? Aye.
So you just missed me on that report on the Regional Planning Committee.
I missed you.
Yeah, had my hand up.
Did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Well, you need to stand up when you.
Be upstanding.
Oh, well, we're going to. What do you want to say?
Well, I just wanted to say, yeah. So is reports that long okay? Because I got the stick about the Maori Committee reports being a bit short. This is about a quarter the size.
So we're just giving us a bit of stick. We've gone all the way back just so that you could give us a bit of stick. Thank you, Mr. Moy. That's yeah. Well done. Okay, so information items. 15. Update on Havelock Water. Oh, yeah. Well, maybe we should do 22 first. Government clean. We do have. Sorry, Marianne. So you're in here. So, government clean water reform proposal and submissions for swimmability. Marianne,
So, Chair, just before Marianne starts, just can I assure councillors that, look, we've been in a difficult cycle around the Ministry for the Environment's deadlines on these submissions with respect to council meetings. And there was a subsequent report that was commissioned by the government that informed the swimmability question that needed to be digested, feedback back to them. So we were in a position where we needed to lodge a submission with the ministry last week, but we did indicate to them that it hadn't been approved by council at that point in time. So if there is any concern or feedback, we can fire that back into the ministry subsequent today. So I just assure you that this is not a rubber stamping exercise, to use the term du jour, and Marianne is here to answer any questions you have.
So I am.
Who do you want to talk to this?
I'm happy to go straight to questions.
Straight to questions. Any questions for Marianne on this report? We have a positive there. We're getting short on numbers. Have we got a quorum? I am counted.
Just one quick, nothing significantly changed from the last discussions that we had in any great respect? There's nothing of significance?
Not in terms of the submission we made, but certainly the documentation that the ministry provided was really useful in understanding some of the background and getting rid of some of the confusion. Yeah.
We have a mover to accept the recommendations, the report. Seconder? Seconder? Do you wish to speak, Paul?
Just like to say thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you for going through this, what ended up being a very confusing submission process put together by central government, and dealing with it in the way that we have, which has made it quite clear for me as to what we're thinking is. Thank you.
Tom?
I would just like to request a personal tutorial on this subject, because I am still totally clueless as to what this means.
And reading the documentation, it is really complicated. Yeah, it is really complicated, and I'd like to invite Andy and Anna, the scientists, to a tutorial if we're going to have one. Yep, we can arrange something.
Yeah, I'd be quite keen too, to spend an hour just hearing from the experts just what does all this mean. And
I would just like to be able to leave the building at some point knowing whether I should applaud this or not, and I still just don't know.
Look, Chair, can I suggest, given that we've got a number of councillors away, that Marianne sends out an offer of a briefing to all councillors.
tutorial, I love that word.
And those that wish to join can.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you for the complexity of this too. So it's been really complex, and I don't think our public really understand it. as we don't. I have a mover. Did you move? Do a seconder? Neil, would you, we had a seconder. Who was seconder? Neil was the seconder. There we are. Nodding down. Good one. Or, do you wish to speak? Fine. All those in favour of accepting these recommendations? Aye. Against? We accept it. Thanks, Marianne. Sorry we made you wait. Okay, item 15. James, I presume that's you, is it?
Look, I'll hand it over to Liz on this one.
Oh, Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, James. This paper was prepared by Ian Maxwell, who's currently unavailable to present. But essentially, the first part of it really is a written version of the report of the inquiry's findings in stage 1, together with commentary under each of their key findings about what action the Regional Council is currently taking. So that's really the focus of paragraphs, or paragraph 3, which goes all the way down to 3.9.1 at the bottom of page 50. And he has identified each of those key summary points or findings from the inquiry, and has identified either what we're doing or what we are planning to do in respect of addressing each of those matters that were raised. So are there any questions about any of that?
Chair, sorry, can I just perhaps very quickly add that I've had some feedback from Mitchell Dash, who've engaged with the council assisting the inquiry, and they have had an extremely positive reception from both the council assisting and from the panel itself to this notion that we provide a joint submission on stage 2 with our regional partners.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to get onto that after stage 1. Sorry. No, that's right. So do you have any questions about any of the paper now?
Yes, I
It's all right.
Yeah.
do. So where are we up to?
Well, they've done the report. James interrupted Liz in the middle of the report and said that we're getting a great reaction from the fact that we're doing a joint application on the second stage. I'm not sure whose brilliant idea that was, but your question, Councillor.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I want to know if there are steps that we can take, given the end of stage 1, the initial inquiries, stage 1 of the inquiry, what immediate steps and planning, etc., have you done and can you do to implement irrespective of stage 2?
Sure. So the key findings, if you like, in respect of us and our role, really relate to the work that we do around consideration of any resource consent application for the supply of public drinking water. And so what we have done, even before the inquiry had released its findings into stage 1, was to ensure that our processes quite clearly, rather than implicitly, take into account the National Environment Standard for Drinking Water, and particularly in relation to the types of activities that are in the vicinity of any proposed drinking water bore. So really looking at, if you like, at that prevention stage as part of any assessment of an application. And just following on from James's comment about stage 2, one of the initial parts of the initial discussion that we've already had as part of our stage 2 discussions with Hastings District Council is around future resource consent applications for urban drinking water supply, and it's around us working together right from the outset in terms of looking at potential sites, identifying, using our respective expertise, potential issues with those sites, and working through that as part of a development, rather than waiting for them to come to us and say, here's an application, for a groundwater bore.
Could I follow that through, Mr. Chair, and ask questions about our broader compliance and consenting environment appreciate that the stage 2 is significant about systems and approaches and the broad spectrum, but nevertheless, out of the inquiry comes some very significant findings that indeed do impact on our systems and approaches. Are there any steps that you're contemplating taking urgently, that is before the entire stage 2 process is completed and findings found? Are you looking to make adjustments in ahead of that inquiry process?
It's probably a question for you, James.
So, Councillor, I think you may recall that, look, immediately following this incident that we engaged with all the territorial authorities in the region in relation to their drinking supply infrastructure, and we've been in discussion with them about their obligations and reminding them of those, and they have been taking steps, and this has been part of the joint working group's work as well, looking at the current state of infrastructure, and I think you can be assured that every council in the region has, subsequent to the Havelock North event, looked at all of their infrastructure up, down and sideways. We do have the work that's going on in relation to bores close to those public drinking supplies, the 1 kilometre perimeter that we've put around all of those, and all of those are being investigated. With respect to our risk assessment and where we put our effort, our compliance and enforcement effort, one of the things that I will be looking at as a matter of urgency is whether areas where we have extremely low probability but very high consequence risk, whether that's adequately catered for, and whether we are overly discounting matters which have traditionally been considered as very low probability in terms of our compliance and enforcement. And I think it's probably fair to say that we have put public drinking supplies into that category somewhat, given that there were, other parties responsible for managing that infrastructure and managing the risks that resided there, and that our focus was on the environmental health and the environmental risks as opposed to the public health risks. So and look, those sort of risks arise in relation to things like hazardous substances and the storage of those, where we might consider them to be looked at through other regulation and by other parties. We might consider it to be an infrastructure that we would otherwise think is pretty safe, and we would say the probability of there being an issue is very, very low. However, the consequence of something going wrong there very, very significant from a public health point of view. So that's the piece of work that I want to look at in particular, and to look at the overall level of resourcing, whether we have the capability and capacity to consider all of those both very high risk and high probability, as well as high risk and low probability areas of non-compliance.
Is the DHB part of the work collaborative process now?
So for stage 2, yes.
No, for just in terms of steps taken to respond to stage 1.
That's the joint working group that we have a number of council officers involved in. The DHB is deeply involved in that. So is Hastings District Council.
So it has been alleged to me that the hospital's bore turned up E. coli readings. Were we alerted to that? And as a consequence of that, they shifted off their own bore and switched on the municipal water, which is chlorinated, as their bore was not, for apparently health reasons, interestingly enough. Are we aware of this? Is this true?
So my understanding is that was brought to the attention of the joint working group, and look, it was one E. coli finding, and there are concerns that maybe it was a false positive. As I understand it, there's been no more E. coli readings. It was a deep, I think it's a 60-metre deep well that is in an environment that has no agricultural production around it. It's in the middle of town, and so it looks on the face of it like it was probably a sampling anomaly. Could have happened in the lab, could have happened in taking the water. But obviously in the aftermath of Havelock North, there is a degree of risk aversion, and Napier City a week or so back was a good example of this, where nobody's taking any chances at all, even with the initial finding.
We could reasonably expect them that they're doing some further testing. What was the time, when did this happen? Do you know?
It's probably a couple of months ago, councillor. But I mean, I'd have to go back and find out the exact, but it was
It was
certainly-
on the public excluded agenda, the DHB recently, so somebody's taking it.
Look, I think one of the issues for them is whether or not to return to that until the water ageing studies have come in, and there's a bit more confidence about the transport time of contaminants through the aquifer to that site. So it may well be they'll return to that infrastructure soon, but we're all awaiting that work from GNS with great interest.
Thank you, Chair. James, from what maybe I wasn't quite hearing you right in your response to Councillor Curtin, but it's my understanding that from what you were saying that when we're looking in the future about assessing risk for future resource consents, it's not only around what's been reviewed is not only around municipal water supplies, but it's essentially around all resource consents that we're issuing. We're going to take that equation of risk versus consequences in a different light, and so I'm reading that right, that's part of what you're looking at. We looked at in the future.
That's my intention, is to look at the entirety of our compliance and enforcement effort across all resource consents. Yeah.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, do I have a mover and a seconder to accept these recommendations?
Oh, I'm happy to move.
Yeah, thank you. Seconder, Tom. All those in favour, or do you wish to speak? Sorry.
I do, Mr. Chair, and I don't mean to hold everyone to ransom at 3 o'clock.
They're leaving on
I
us.
see them leaving by drones, but I do have 4 hours of council time left today. So, Mr. Chair, there is an element in this that I'm hoping the staff have picked up on, and that's the human element that has been generated out of this entire inquiry in terms of stage 1. And I want to issue my own apology to the people of Havelock North, and particularly those people who have lost a mum or a dad as a consequence probably of this event. And I make that apology because I was a part of a council over a decade or more that contributed in some ways to this tragedy. And I say that because my colleagues and I in earlier days did not look hard enough at the whole consenting compliance arrangement for a number of reasons, but particularly we as politicians, I think, placed pressure on staff to act in a certain way, to go softly on compliance, and as a consequence, I think we've ended up where we are. So we've had, in some small way, a contribution to that. I want to say that I found the report, if you like, deficient in looking at the issues internally and trying to explain them away without an overarching view that says, actually, we got it wrong and we need to put it right. And I'm disappointed at the report for those reasons. I'm saying we should not, and we ought not to offer apologies, offer explanations without apology along with this. And that's essentially what I'm saying here, is that we really mucked up as an organisation, and we ought to front with that and say that, and then demonstrate with some urgency that we really mean business to make it not happen again. This was a very, I've said this before, a very significant, substantial event, should never have happened, and ultimately all of us hold a measure of responsibility for it. I am disappointed with our colleagues from Hastings District who are more directly implicated in the failure, but that's for them to determine. Their attrition is their business in my mind, but our attrition is our business, and the next steps are very significant in making sure this never happens again.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Do you wish to second up? Anyone else wish to speak? Do we have a mover and a second? Paul's very still 5 of us. We're moving to second. All those in favour of accepting this report? Aye. It's unanimous. Against? Against? There's no one against. We'll accept it.
Mr Chair, just before we go on, the representative from Ruapuni, Nikki Kirikiri, has passed away last night. So Joyce Ann just passed it out. I caught Alan just on his way out just to let him know. So if you could let Rick and Peter know. Yeah. So probably Tora and I and somebody else will go up tomorrow to where the tunny is.
Mike, that's very tragic news. Unexpected? Mm. Thank you, Joyce Ann. Thank you, Mike. Well, there you go. Life has its ups and downs. That's very tragic indeed.
Mr Chair, have we had apologies from absent councillors? What's that all about?
I don't know. It could be a secret meeting. I'm not sure. But we have a quorum, so we'll just carry on.
Might not, if they don't return.
We do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You won't.
We asked Paul to check his BO.
I did share this morning, Mike.
You'll be really worried if Fenton moves to that chair.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we can joke about this, but I'm an elected councillor who puts a shitload of time into doing my job, and I resent the fact that a councillor
Oh, they've
has
gone permanent?
imposed upon us a 3 o'clock limit, because that appears to be when their faculties cease functioning. And I hope the machine is working here.
No, I think we should just pause on.
Well,
They
we
to-
have 2 people just meander out the door here. And as far as I'm concerned, if we have business before the council and need to be here at midnight, we should be here till midnight. Not because somebody thinks, meetings shouldn't last beyond 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'm out of here. And I'm perfectly happy to have the discussion with all councillors present.
I think we should. I didn't realise they'd gone permanently. But they appear to. Bags are gone.
The other consequence as well, Mr Chair, is that the criticism had been laid to the balance of councillors about divisions, etc. Well, I find the behaviour of those casting stones in this regard to be appalling. I just think that there's a double standard being operated, and here we are. You know, if I go out to the loo now, you've got to stop business. It's outrageous.
Cross your legs, councillor. Yeah, I accept. I accept that it's not acceptable, but let's move on, and I'll have a chat to them both. So the next item is the work program.
Chair, can I suggest we take it as read, and staff happy to take any questions in relation to any of the
I think that's a very good idea. Any questions regarding the work program? Councillor Wilson?
Well, it's an unfair question with the current company, no offence to the current company, but the Hawkeye Coastal Monitoring Buoy, we're going to replace it. Could someone remind me what that collects
Could I perhaps,
and what data?
Dr. Jeff Smith is the acting science manager at the moment. So Jeff, do you want to just quickly pop up and see if you can answer the question, please?
Sorry, that's on page 57 under resource management, and it's number 33.
To be honest, I'm not 100% Yeah, but it is a water quality monitoring buoy. I imagine it gives us things like wave height, wind speed and direction and that sort of thing, and it's been taken in for recalibration and redeployment.
I'm just really interested in what, we have an ambition in the marine coastal environment to do our bit, but if we can't, I'd like to understand at a future discussion, maybe it's an E&S discussion in the next couple of months, how what interests us as a council, what we measure, how we measure it, and what's really important going forward if we are going to make a difference in the marine coastal environment, because there's some opportunities developing nationally that we could tap into potentially, but I just need to understand a bit more about it. So
I can take that away and we can either report to you personally or back to committee or both.
probably through a committee maybe. But.
Okay.
Just going to number 38, the ambient concentration, the air and climate science, ambient concentrations of arsenic and lead have been monitored at Marewa Park for a period of 1 year. Greg, do you know if that's as a consequence of the discussions we had with the constituent we met with, or is that something that's been ongoing?
I'm not too sure actually, because it wasn't Marewa Park. Does that cover the area down Kennedy Road?
Yeah, it's on that.
No, I can't answer that, I'm sorry.
I'll take my chances on another science question or two. 40, and with both of these, what I just asked for is 3 or 4 sentences from you or anyone as to what they mean. 48, quantification of wind erosion severity across plains areas, project in early stages. What's going on, what's it about, and who's doing it, and when might we see a product? If you know the answer, fine. If not,
This is in land science, is it?
yeah.
No, I don't, sorry.
Okay, and the other one is also in land science. 51, regional peat organic soil characterization project, which seems to have something to do with figuring out soil health. But again, I just welcome a paragraph as to what is it. And
The peat survey is to do with wetlands and the peat resource in the area. So it's a survey of the extent of the peat and the state of it throughout the region.
okay. Yeah, maybe the last sentence of each of those paragraphs could say, and why is that significant?
Can I just get some feedback from councillors on the work program that's reported to you? Is it too detailed? Is it too much? Or do you want more explanation on those reports?
Chair, one of the things that strikes me out of when going through those science outputs is I'd be interested to know the if you like the framework in which they're cast. Is it a catchment-based approach? Is it an issue-based approach? I'm just seeing a list and schedule of stuff we are doing, and I'm just struggling to see where that converges and for what purpose overall, and what outcome we expect from it.
So, look, on behalf of Ian, there is a science and research strategy, and it is linked heavily through to our policy and regulatory drivers that we have. So there is a logic to this. Some of it relates to ongoing SOE monitoring, but some of it relates very specifically to policy change. And so that is all planned and it is structured and it is driven off the LTP, but I appreciate when you see it like this, it's not very easy to see how it all hangs together and what the sum of the parts looks like. So look, we'll provide some feedback to Ian upon his return about the value, I think, perhaps for the next E&S committee or something like that, providing a bit of a picture around this work program.
Just very quickly, Chair, if you wanted my feedback on the quality of the content of the report, whenever I have a ratepayer have a go at me about how underworked and overpaid our staff are, I always refer them to that report, and that seems to quieten down quite a number of fears. So it's, to me, it gives a really good indication of just how busy we are as an organisation.
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse that too. I find it really useful. It just highlights my thinking on certain areas that we're in, how widely we're in. So no, I find it quite good. But I do, and I'd be interested to know what our thing on Pete is as well. So, but you can't anticipate what council's going to ask. So I think you carry on this format, and if you get a question, you might do it offline, because Tom's particularly interested in that. Councillor Wilson.
Well, seeing you just mentioned the word Tom, Chair, I had a question for him in regard to electric vehicle promotional plan under development. Successful meeting. It's always very good to read that.
And you could add when he's buying the chairman that Telstra.
The Tesla's on its way.
The Tesla's on its way.
Just can you, like in all seriousness, is this
Successful meeting. The minutes have been drafted and will be circulated to everyone. And we have all of the territorials were here, and one of the and the health board and a bunch of others, and one of the things that we're going to try to push them in the direction of is at least considering a so-called EV first policy, which doesn't commit them to buy them, but it does say that as you are rolling over your fleet, you would make this a standard part of your evaluation process, and see if we can get everybody, the 5 authorities in the area, plus maybe EIT and DHB, to commit to that being how they want to proceed with this. And then secondly, there'll be a convening of the communications types from those different entities, because it was seen that the sort of earliest first fruit was just to be more coherent and get the right messages out through the various channels that we all have as councils, with our websites and newsletters and so forth, and that we should do that in a more coordinated fashion. So those were the two key. Paul was at the meeting. Anything else?
The other thing I'd comment on, Tom, would be that the representatives from central government who are up here, there was a guy from Land Transport and there was another fellow.
NZ Transport, yeah.
They were both really impressed with the way that Hawke's Bay as a whole is looking to do stuff rather than just talking about it. We're seem to be further ahead than most other areas in the country.
And actually, New Zealand Transport has a policy of putting fast charging stations every 75 kilometers on major highways, and they're pretty actively rolling that out. And one of the things we asked Unison was here, is for simply a map of Hawke's Bay and where the current charging, slow, fast, whoever owns them, where they are. Because I think there's more out there than people realize at this point on that. So it's still pretty basic steps that are being tabled, and the more ambitious stuff will show up in these minutes that will.
Okay,
we were going to
you.
bring it back to the next, from our council standpoint, that would come back to the next environment committee meeting.
Just the only thing I was going to add to that is there's an electric farm bike out now. It's been out for a couple of years, which is 3 horsepower. To put it in comparison, a 200cc motorbike's about 12 horsepower, but they're looking to double the engine rating, and the batteries are just getting better and better and better. A 200cc motorbike, farm bike, two-wheel motorbike is around $5,500, somewhere in there between 5 and 6, including GST. And these electric bikes, they've got them down now to 6,000. So that's a conversation that could be added to this potentially, because they run on the fuel is under 10% of the equivalent petrol.
So we could have staff on motorbikes, Councillor.
No, I'm thinking I want one to go home in, but I'll need one at Putarino because
Thank you, guys. Come on, we're moving along here. Do I have someone who can, will move that we accept? Thank you. Tom, seconder. Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? I think we've talked enough. Thank you very much. The reports are great. Okay. We have final item here. We have the chairman's report. Not quite the final. I'm just going to take it as read. Any questions? Just to show that I haven't been lazy and I'm missing out a few days here. I noted. What's that?
By saying I haven't been lazy.
So,
And it's fantastic to sit on this side of the table and ask the chairman about the report.
which I
but I
black out
just-
at 11 o'clock at night.
I just wondered, and I was always fearful that someone would ask me this, and I never have it in 6 years, but at times your diary's populated, obviously, in advance. And I'm not saying we need to see it in advance, because there's things that a chairman has to do, but some things, I don't know whether you could find a way that, not to include people, but it would be quite nice to know in advance that you were meeting with a group or someone perhaps, potentially, that there could be some flavours that your colleagues could add to the conversation. Now, that makes it a bit complicated, Chair, and I'm not advocating we get your diary, your daily diary from Di or anything, but I'm just wondering if there's a potential to...
Actually, I would be happy if you had that, if Di gave you the diary. She's onto my back. She gets this...
Yeah, well,
she doesn't get everything in, but she gets a lot, and I'd be really happy if you had a look at it. I got nothing to hide.
well, I realise that too,
Yeah.
and I was the same, but sometimes to see this, it's great you're doing all this great stuff, but there's some things that, for example...
What would you have liked to be involved in?
Well, maybe, I don't know, I might have made an effort to go to the Federated Farmers AGM to listen to you talk if I knew you were going. It's that sort of thing. But,
you'd probably be better at the aged care.
hang on.
Well, okay.
Just something to
Diane
consider,
does
that's all
the
I'm
diary in advance, and I'm really happy. I'll tell her for any week to have a look any time.
Some of the lunches I'll be prepared to come with you.
Just like last Sunday.
Can we have the menu?
I think that, you have highlights. To me, the Federated Farmers was, I really enjoyed that. It was a little bit testy. James said he had he spoke after me, and unfortunately I couldn't stay, that he had to smooth the waters a little bit. I didn't think I was too bad, but some of the, that's not what they thought. I think the highlight for me was going to the Harts farm. That was quite stunning, really. What they've been able to achieve in a really short amount of time. Certainly they had the capital, which was from Air New Zealand, to help. I did really enjoy attending the meeting in Wairau, which we did attend. I thought that was really good. Round table meeting, and those guys in Wairau, they didn't hold back, and we didn't hold back. It was great. So those kind of meetings I really enjoy. Otherwise,
The only part I'd add to it, Chair, is there's things coming up, and look, it wouldn't have worked today, and frankly, I had no intention to go to it. But I mean, the National Balanced Farmer Awards are on tonight. They're in Invercargill, of all places, and hellishingly challenging to get there, etc. But I mean, if some of that stuff was, obviously, I don't think any of us would have attended, and hopefully Meng Foon's down there representing our combined region for the Balance Awards, but there just could have been an opportunity, perhaps, if that was sort of sitting there coming up, you could delegate or whatever. And I mean, that's entirely up to you.
I'm really pleased to do that. All my life I've been a strong delegator, and I really do want to see that happen and to share around these things, because you clearly can't go to everything, and in any event you don't want to go to everything. It'd drive you nuts. So in that regard, I'm really keen to, you and Debbie went to that water symposium as an example. So I'm really keen that we are represented in those things, and so perhaps we could get the agenda out a couple of months ahead. James might help us with this, and so people can put their hand up and say, hey, I'd be really keen to attend that. Such as that dinner, the balance thing at Invercargill's a little bit out of the way, but if it was in Taranaki,
the beach sedimentation conference in Fiji. Can I take that one?
You're on. There's quite a good study be done in Bermuda right at the moment, and I reckon I could. Electric.
All
Okay.
we'd have to do, Chair, is be to cash in our lunch vouchers, and you'll be right.
Yeah, I see somebody said that in this morning's Dominions that we should be bringing our packed lunch. Yeah. So can I have thank you and seconder? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Affixing the common seal. No, we've done that. Items are not on the agenda. We're moving along. There were two.
LGNZ Water Symposium.
You. Actually, for clarity, Debbie Hewitt didn't go to that.
Oh, didn't she?
No,
Oh.
we went to a that was a couple of months or a month ago HR conference. Anyway, besides that, just to give people an update, I'm not at the next 2 days, but I did go to Monday afternoon, Tuesday. They had speakers such as Sir Peter Gluckman, but one that really got me, and one I'm interested in us pursuing, or certainly the sector pursuing, is a guy called Professor David Maidment, who has mapped the whole of the US. He did it in 12 months with a team on catchment, and it was done purely for flooding. And he ran this model. It was unreal. Like, you can predict every storm coming over, exactly where every waterway is going to end up, and it all happens in real time. I think it's only 10 minutes behind, isn't it, James, or something like that? And you'll see it as you walk out. The timing's perfect. The big LAWA sign out there. Hopefully all councillors log into that regularly, like I do, which tells you the state of the waterways in Hawke's Bay and nationally, etc. Certainly on quality, and there's other things being added to it. He saw that as a tool that could do everything they do in the States and more going forward. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that that piece of work has got everyone stirred up, and there's a great chance that this LAWA website, which belongs to the regional councils, we all put money into it in the early days, and we still contribute going forward, could turn into a one-stop shop that would cover everything that happens in New Zealand, potentially even biodiversity improvements, etc. So I just thought that was worth mentioning. Sir Peter Gluckman, yeah, that was interesting. I don't know if anyone's read his water report, but there was a whole range of speakers there. We had people talking about game changers in achieving better water management. Kevin Hackwell, Forest and Bird, but we also had Dairy NZ and the iwi leaders were there in that same conversation. So they were all up on the stage at the same time. They all had their 10 minutes and they took questions. Hugely, be the best symposium LGNZ's put on in my time anyway. And the last point I'd make is, as all the PowerPoints, etc. become available, I'll do my best through DI to get them out to everyone. So range of conversations, all about fresh water. That's all it was about. So.
Chair, if I could just very quickly add, we saw a presentation from Auckland Council that was relevant to the Ahuriri incident recently, and that is that Auckland City has 30 sewage overflow sites where during a major storm event it is designed specifically to dilute the sewage overflow and put it into the sea. So precisely the situation that happened there, and they're working to address it. And resolving one of them alone, which is at Auckland Zoo, and piping it back to the Manukau treatment plant, is involving a 4.5 metre diameter pipe going from there to there, and it's $1 billion to solve one of their sewage.
And the planning will take to 2025.
Yeah, that's before they start building.
And just to finish here, thank you for, if I may, Chair. The solution to pollution is dilution. That used to be the catch cry. Every town in the country has this fantastic opportunity to, when the all the systems are overflowing, they let it go down the drain. That's what we saw the other day. So it's not, it's a design fault, Chair.
Well, thank you for that, both of you, yeah. So it just shows you that you do pick up stuff at these things, so we do need to have the program and people can put their hand up because we do need to spread out and improve our intellectual capabilities and our knowledge. So if people are keen to go to these things, I'm really keen for them to go. Travel is the best way to get intellectual property. Okay, this...
Alan's not here.
Oh, Alan's disappeared, so he hasn't got his thing.
I'm not sure what he was going to talk about other than the gorge is almost open, but they're doing a huge study on
He was going to talk about that, yeah.
through a range of other options because frankly the gorge long term is looking pretty tenuous. So.
I was looking forward to talking about the Manawatu Gorge.
Okay, no, we're not going to though.
Oh, okay.
Because he's not
Move
here.
us into public excluded,
Well,
Chair.
just before we do that, I just want to pick up a point. Our two councillors leaving without an apology, and as a chair, I look up and they just disappeared. It is actually in breach of our standing orders. I don't think we should do anything dramatic about this, but I will assure you that I'll give them both a ring and talk to them about it. Okay. We're going to move into public excluded to do these 2-minute items. And we have a seconder. All those in favour to move into public excluded? Aye. Clear the room.